We're here to talk about the enigma that is hashtags, or the hashtag. Now, hashtags, yes, they are, but gosh, can they be mighty. It's obviously, it's often not the hashtag itself, but what you do with the hashtag that makes it matter. Some of the most important movements we've seen over the last few years have started with just one simple hashtag. And when used as well, there's so much more than just a few words. They can create digital communities and powerful movements for years to come. And on top of this, they're an amazing form of engagement and offer the perfect opportunity to create a two-way conversation with your audience through user-generated content. Joining me today to discuss the power of a hashtag are two incredible people from two even more incredible charities. First up, we have Rachel Growcott, who's the Director of Communications and Public Fundraising at Bloody Good Period. Rachel, why don't you give a quick introduction to who you are, what you do, where you come from, and then we'll crack on.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel. I'm the Director of Comms and Public Fundraising at Bloody Good Period. Of course, I hope you've heard of us, but in case you haven't, we get period supplies to refugees, asylum seekers, and others who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford or access them. We provide menstrual education as well, and we want to normalise periods for everybody. And I'm sure we'll talk much more about that in the session. I started off just doing social media for BGP a few years ago. My role has kind of grown and expanded over time. Just wanted to give a shout out to Becca, our social media manager, who's here and will be kind of taking questions and networking afterwards as well.
Well, welcome, Rachel, and welcome, Becca, of course. We also have Matt Moore, who's Corporate Fundraising Manager from Mermaids. Welcome, Matt. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do.
Hi there. Matt, pronouns he, him. I'm Corporate Fundraising Manager for Mermaids. If you don't know anything about us, we are a charity that supports transgender, non-binary and gender diverse young people, their families and caregivers, and the professionals who support them. So we support teachers, people in social services and so forth. We were founded in '95, we're going for 26 years now, and we offer a helpline, community services, so forums and meetups for our service users. And we're here to create a more equal world for trans people, basically. A bit more about myself. I've been in the LGBT charity sector for nearly 5 years now. I started off at Stonewall, offering LGBT diversity advice for the retail and consumer goods sectors, moving to Mermaids about 2 years ago to lead their corporate engagement as it was growing, as has the charity in that time. So great to be here and looking forward to this discussion.
Magic. Well, it's a pleasure to have you both with us. It's worth saying before I do jump in that while I do have plenty of questions for the panel, please feel free to submit your own. We'll try and we will dedicate a bit of time to them at the end, and I'll also try and squeeze a few in throughout. But without further ado, we are here to talk about hashtags, and you are our gracious guests because you've both run amazing hashtags campaigns. I'd love for you to run us through them before we get into the nitty-gritty of the panel. Matt, can you start? Can you tell us about one of your famous hashtag campaigns?
Of course. And sorry if you hear some whining behind me. My puppy's just woken up in the perfect timing to be on this panel. So my partner will be back very soon to escort him away. So apologies if you hear whining. There's joys of working from home. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about a partnership we did last year with Starbucks. Obviously, no small feat, one of the world's biggest brands. We work with them on their winning entry to the Channel 4 Diversity and Inclusion Awards, which has been a project they've been running for a few years, and last year focused on LGBT. We worked with them at shortlisting stage, so pretty much from September through to launch in February. And it was a really, really amazing partnership. We supported them from sort of storyboarding, casting, and we're kind of a sounding board for them to ensure that everything was landing properly and would resonate with the trans community. The campaign itself was built on amazing insights that they found from a lot of trans YouTubers, actually. The trans people were going into Starbucks stores and using the name on the cup action that is very famous through Starbucks to test new names. And I think for a lot of cisgender people, I'm cisgender myself, I'm a trans ally, we don't really think about our names too much. It's just part of our identity, it's embedded in us. But this little bit of insight was so massive and quite common, actually, that they decided to build it into the creative of their campaign. So if you've not seen the ad, I think you can actually watch it on a link at the side of the networking room. It's about a trans man who is going about his daily life because he's being called by his birth name, which is Gemma. So by his phone provider, by his dad. And then he's in Starbucks and they go, "What's your name?" And he goes, "It's James." And you see the name on the cup and there's your sort of amazing moment. It really was from day one for us, we agreed to go in on the partnership because the idea was so authentic. It was quite benign. It was like normalized. It was human. It wasn't kind of splashing rainbows everywhere as a lot of pride campaigns can be. And through that creative process, we settled on the hashtag "What's your name?", which is the kind of iconic line at the end. And yeah, it became a real central part of the campaign. And I think to this day it's had nearly 30,000 uses on social, and really became sort of the name of the campaign, even though there's another name of it, which is "Every Name's a Story," but I don't think anyone actually used that at the end of the day. So yeah, that was Starbucks and what I'm about to talk about today.
Amazing, thanks, Matt. And we'll dig into the nuances out in a minute. But I want to switch to Rachel now. And here, I know you've got two amazing campaigns you can share with us. Let's start at the top.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. So I'll start with the most recent one, and one we're actually going to do another push on next week, actually. So you'll probably hopefully see this over social media next week when we get to Menstrual Hygiene Day. But we launched No Shame Here for International Women's Day this year. So a bit of context as to why, looking back to that lovely, pre-lockdown, if everybody remembers that. So pre-lockdown, we had a campaign called Walk of No Shame. And that was about the sense of shame that we have been conditioned to feel around periods. So I'm sure lots of people in the audience will resonate with the whole idea of when you need to go and change your period product, you hide it. So you take your bag to the loo, or you put your tampon up your sleeve, or your pad in your pocket. And we had a whole campaign about challenging why we've been made to feel that way, because periods are not something to be ashamed of. And we wanted to turn that into a community fundraising campaign, have people do the Walk of No Shame at their parties and so on, make it a sponsored thing. And then, of course, the pandemic happened. The other bit of context around International Women's Day is that in previous years, we have been incredibly fortunate to receive support from lots of amazing people doing collections in their offices or cafes or all kinds of amazing events where they were collecting physical products and then delivering them to our storage unit in London to go out to the drop-in centres that we're partnered with. And the International Women's Day 2020, beginning of March, so right before lockdown. This year, completely different. Obviously, none of those things were possible. So we had to totally rethink what we were doing for International Women's Day, and also this campaign around there being no shame. So those two things came together into this hashtag No Shame Here. And it was all about giving people a digital lockdown friendly way of taking down period shame, opening up conversations, encouraging people to challenge and think about why they've been conditioned to feel ashamed of something that's normal and natural, posting about it to open up the conversation, encourage others to get involved, and then hopefully where people were able to donate as well, so that we could carry on getting products to people who couldn't access them. And it was really successful on all of those fronts, which is why we're doing it again next week for Menstrual Hygiene Day, but with different content and some really exciting stuff happening. Shall I go back a bit, Chris, and talk about the Christmas one too?
Yes, please, because yeah, that was a great one as well.
Yeah, okay. So at Christmas, we run a campaign called Festive Period. And the hashtag for that, which I have to give all credit to our agency partner Studio of Our Own for, I did not come up with this, but I wish I had. The hashtag for that is Flow Ho Ho. So anyone who follows us on Instagram hopefully knows that we are all about period puns. We believe humour is another way of taking down the taboos around periods. Love a pun, exactly. We're all about them. So Flow Ho Ho is definitely an extension of that tone of voice and humour. And it's just really well received. Last year we extended it onto jumpers and so on. I was actually going to wear my Christmas jumper, but it's too thick for a May day, even the rubbish weather we're having. So we now have Christmas jumpers that say Flow Ho Ho. We have badges last year as well. Yeah, we love it.
Absolutely love it. Yeah, that's great. I would have loved it if to see you arrive in a Christmas jumper today, but totally understand why. No, thank you both for sharing a little bit of insight into your hashtag campaigns. It seems that influencers was a big part of both your strategies, and I'm really interested. Obviously, you can't just throw names like Starbucks around, Matt. I'm really interested to know, how did you get into that partnership with Starbucks? What was that journey like?
Interesting, to say the least. No, it all started with a conversation with the creative agency who actually sort of gave birth to the idea. They were very keen on it being an authentic campaign and a partnership, so we agreed pretty much in principle before the final pitches that we would, should this be successful, we would work with them on the campaign. Be it a fundraiser one, of course. So there was a kickback for us, but it was quite a learning experience for Mermaids and ourselves as well, because we were a growing team. I was in post, I think, 2 or 3 months when the phone call came through. Our director of comms had been in place, I think, only about 6 months. And it was, it was a time sink as well, because we were working across not only Starbucks, but 4 agencies, I think, in total. But at the same time, it was ensuring that this really resonated with everyone, because ultimately, if you're going to talk about the trans community, a lot of people are very distant from that community or don't know a lot about that community. So us being there every step of the way ensured that we kept them on track and that it landed as well as it did. So there were some tricky conversations sometimes. You had to kind of bring it back. And you mentioned influencers. I think a lot of people who aren't very deeply involved in the LGBT community will think of a trans person, they go to Caitlyn Jenner. And you're like, well, she's not that great for the community in a lot of ways. I think recently she talked about young trans people shouldn't be participating in sport that aligns with their gender identity. So it's just gently nudging and steering and sort of having those sort of kind eyes and gentle conversations with those that need to be taken on that journey. Our influencer plan itself, the trans influencer community in the UK is fairly small. And it wasn't just from day one, and we were always in contact with them for across all of our campaigns and involving them. And since lockdown, actually, we've tried to engage influencers through our Instagram lives. So we will sort of every few Fridays, we'll jump on Instagram. One of our social media leads will sort of have a chat with people. And through lockdown, it was really important for us to ensure that we were there for our service users and maintaining those communications. And we actually ran a 12-hour festival in early April last year, which was insane. Raised about 12 grand, but was just showed the importance of being there digitally and front of mind. So yeah.
Awesome. No, thanks for sharing that. And Rachel, you've obviously got 2 very equally different but equally effective campaigns. Most people can wish to have one amazing hashtag. You've managed to pick up 2. What's been your process for kind of for pushing those sort of creative ideas, albeit very differently, forward?
Well, obviously we have kind of different points in our calendar where we'll focus on different things. So the No Shame Here campaign is, very focused on period shame and taking that down. And we want to highlight that at specific points in the calendar that make sense for that. So International Women's Day and Menstrual Hygiene Day are obvious hooks for the campaign to sit around. The Christmas campaign, with it being called festive period and then having that flow ho ho hashtag is obviously more lighthearted. And I think that really felt like such a good choice when we got to the end of 2020, because if we didn't need flow ho ho at the end of 2020, I don't know when we would have. So I think it's about having that mix and variety in an entire comms plan and calendar. We're not just about one thing and we're not just about one topic all the time. Yes, obviously it all ties under periods for us and period equity, but there are a variety of ways into that. And we want to give people different experiences throughout the year and throughout their interactions with us. And that, I think, goes down from a year view, but also to a weekly view. If you look at our Instagram, we mix it up a lot over the course of a week and talk about different areas of our work. Some stuff will be very serious. Some stuff will be much more serious. And I think there's room for all of those within a brand. And as for kind of creativity, I think that's one of the great things about working digitally. And I think it ties to what we do as well. Periods have been kind of shrouded in the secrecy and hidden, swept under our metaphorical carpet for so long, that using things like art and humor and creativity to break down some of those barriers and just give people permission to talk about it is really, really powerful. That includes hashtags, I think, because it's an extension of our brand and it gets the conversations started.
Exactly, it spreads the message far and wide, doesn't it? Brilliant. So you mentioned that you both used agencies or some type of influencer or something like that in the sort of strategy behind your hashtag usage. Is there a way that charities can run, be successful with hashtags without the use of influencers or agencies? Rachel, I'll go with you first for that one.
Sure. Yeah, I really think there is. I'd love to direct people to our Instagram and have a look in the highlights. There's a whole section on No Shame here. And if you go through there, yep, you'll absolutely see some influencers. But I find the really powerful ones is our user-generated content. So it's our supporters and our followers getting involved. So I was just reminding myself of it this morning. There's someone posted a photo of their bathroom cupboard where they kept their period supplies. And they said, I'd never normally show this, but I've been inspired by the campaign because why should I feel ashamed? And that is the power, getting people to challenge what they've been taught and post their own take on it. We had our trustee, the wonderful Ruby, posting a video of her boiling her menstrual cup. That is entirely normal. And her putting it on Instagram made it normal and made other people think, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to look into that. So I think it can be really powerful to kind of maximize by resharing and keeping in highlights, etc., what the community are doing with your hashtag.
Absolutely, very, very powerful tool, UGC. It's been a running theme through most of the day, actually. A lot of people have seen it tapping in that, especially lockdown brought that, everyone went online, everyone started looking for more things to do digitally, and being able to tap into a community, essentially what it is, through a collective ideal or belief is just, it's powerful. It becomes really, really powerful. Matt, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's kind of being hyper aware of your audience and supporters and what is trending at the end of the day, but not always what is trending, but what is building momentum. How we sort of use our social kind of differs between platforms because it kind of has to. We have to keep like Twitter for more like serious conversations, but then really positive things can erupt on there as well. Like I have terrible memories, so I'm probably going to get these wrong, but like this is what non-binary looks like, things like that. So kind of showing our support for those and support for those people and using that content to elevate ourselves. Whereas Instagram, we use a bit more for just staying really positive, because we think our audience is, we know our audience is younger there. Staying affirming, staying positive. I just agree on what Rachel said as well.
Champion. Thanks very much, both. So I'm going to change pace a little bit now and delve into sort of the nuances of how, why, where, when, we should be doing hashtag campaigns. The hashtag I often feel is often a misunderstood marketing tool and something that's quite hard to get right, actually. And, we as marketers can often use them quite sparingly just at the end of posts. Twitter made them famous, but they've had a resurgence now a little bit with TikTok. You can just about use them on any other platform as well. We actually have the Be More Digital hashtag, which we have actually trended before, which I'm proud to say, although it was a while ago. But it's a great way for people to engage with us as an event and catch up with stuff after the event as well. What would be some of your key benefits, would you say, of a charity using hashtags? Matt, I'll come to you first on that
one. I think because it can make your campaign really identifiable and singular and meaningful. I'd say, but I don't think you should overcomplicate it. I think they should be used when they're right. You can't just, I think using hashtag for the sake of it can be really, really actually work against you in the long run. Make them accessible as well. I think we had a lot of conversation with What's Your Name about capitalization within the hashtag, and and if you don't capitalize, then a screen reader will backfire on you. And also test them, because we had things like "It's my name" for Starbucks, but that wasn't really reflective of what was actually happening in the creative itself. And yeah, I'll always remember that Susan Boyle moment with not actually capitalizing it. So yeah, it can really backfire if you don't think hard on it. But yeah, make it, don't overuse them. Use them sparingly, because if you're throwing them out every 5 minutes, then you're just going to confuse your audience, and it gives people choice, and then you don't really have a single star to follow basically for the campaign. Yeah, think hard on them, and don't use them for the sake of use.
Great. It's camel case, isn't it? I believe they call it for the accessibility, where they capitalize the first letter. Thanks for that. And Rachel, what would you say are the key benefits for hashtag usage?
I mean, I agree with everything Matt has just said. You see me away. I remember when I was first getting my head around what a hashtag was, the filing cabinet analogy being really useful. So the idea of you're putting your content in a filing cabinet, and anybody else who's looking for that content can come along. And I still think about that. But I think it's just become so much more as well. Like I've already talked about, it's an extension of your brand. You can reflect your tone of voice in it, like we've done with Flow Ho Ho. Also, no shame here, that edge of kind of defiance in the face of period shame. I absolutely agree with don't overuse your hashtag. So don't write those tweets there where every other word is a hashtag, because then you'll dilute the power of the ones you are focusing on. I think there's real power in researching. Obviously, check that no one else is using your hashtag. But I think testing is really important as well. There are ones that we haven't pursued that didn't work so well. Just because we've had these 2 great successes doesn't mean there isn't stuff that didn't work so well. But that's part of the power of digital, that you can test, fail, move on.
So what were some of the things you did to test the hashtag then, or to test the validity, I guess, of a hashtag?
So sometimes we just tried them and saw whether they kind of got traction and engagement, and those might be campaigns that run for a while but not really kind of gathered pace. But often we will just talk to our team about them to see whether they feel right, and that is something I wanted to talk about the feeling of hashtags, and kind of the emotional weight they can hold in your communications when you're trying to achieve these big goals, challenging people's perceptions, etc. I think about how they feel is also really important. So we'll often do kind of sense checks with our team as well, just to get a wider set of views on them.
And I'd just say for our testing for Starbucks wasn't really testing, but we checked the validity of the experience. There was not validity, the universality, that's not a word, I don't know how universal the experience in the ad was with our service users. And we actually had, I think, about 10 young people come back and say, yeah, I went into a store and I tried my name there. So that phrase in store is, again, universal. So to be able to use something that's already there and exploit it in some way for a completely different view was so powerful for us. But I think at Mermaids, we will regularly just sort of dip in and out of hashtags that come up time and time again, like trans rights or human rights, protect trans kids, just so that we're kind of mainstaying on those, because they will trend in and out sometimes, depending on where conversations are going, especially if there is sort of transphobia in the media and so forth.
Yes, similarly, so we'll always use hashtags like period equity or end period poverty, because those are terms that are used a lot on social media, but in media coverage of period poverty related issues, etc.
Champion. That pretty much answered my next question, which was going to be what makes a good hashtag, but we'll just leave that one. It's done. You mentioned a lot about, when mentioned testing and tracking and that sort of thing. How were you testing? What metrics were you checking to make sure the hashtags were working and not working? Rachel, I'll go to you first for that one.
And this is where I wanted to talk a bit about feeling and emotions as well, because obviously there's all kind of scientific measures that you can use. So make sure you're using your metrics on all the platforms, and if you've got third-party tracking platforms, then those are great too. So you can look at your hashtag reach and impressions, and I think Matt can talk lots more about how he did that with the Starbucks campaign. But for me, I think the emotional value of hashtags is really important as well, and just simply people's reaction to it and their engagement with it. So if I think back to No Shame Here for International Women's Day, people telling their stories, people saying, I've never thought about that before. Why is that a thing? Why have I been conditioned to feel this way? And then telling their stories of how they're changing that. That is the power of a hashtag. So for us, those kind of engagement moments are really meaningful, and loop back to our objective, which I mentioned right at the beginning. One of our organizational objectives is normalizing periods. So when we see conversations happening that are directly doing that, we think that's a big tick.
Well, yeah, sentiment is obviously coming such a big metric now within the social media world, isn't it? How people perceive a brand, and I think you're 100% right. A hashtag is an extension of a brand, especially when used in the way they're being used for your respective charities. So testing sentiment and tracking sentiment is paramount. Matt, anything to add to that?
I mean, for the campaign itself, we lent on the agencies who have the sort of technological access, etc. But since then, actually, we now use a platform called Rival IQ, and it allows you to compare yourself to others in your sector or other charities you kind of aspire to, and it's really good at picking out trends with hashtags. So out of your last 10, Insta will tell you kind of key insights. I don't use that often, our social media team do, but it's like, out of your last 10 Instagram posts, the ones that with these hashtags perform the best, similar with Twitter, or it's really good at picking out those insights, but also if there are trends within your sector. The LGBT sector is fairly small, but it'll pick out, oh, your competitor did this, and yeah, Rival IQ is the one. Your competitor did this, it was really successful, or picking up trends within the group, so you can really say, well, this is what our audience are really responding to. How can we build on that? How can we maximize that impact? So yeah, there are so many platforms out there. It can be quite tricky. So I would lean on consultants or experts as we have in the past.
Champion, thank you. And from a platform point of view, I obviously mentioned Twitter and TikTok a little bit earlier. Did you limit yourselves to certain platforms when you were pushing these hashtags out, or was it a case of throw the net far and wide? Matt, I'll start with you on that one.
We had to be quite consistent because it was literally the campaign name. But with the tracking access we have, I think we will sort of see what's performing best on different platforms. Unfortunately, we're not on TikTok yet. I think we're lagging behind, especially as a youth charity. But yeah, I think it's really context driven a lot of the time. I don't think one's going to apply to all, basically. And I think Twitter's usually for those moments, whereas things like Instagram, it's more for people will spam those hashtags because they might be picked up in different ways. But yeah, it all comes down to testing and really tracking what's working and what's not at the end of the day, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. And Rachel?
Just to add that we're also not on TikTok, so you should feel better, Matt, simply because we've made the decision that we would rather do some things really well than spread ourselves too thinly, because all charities have limited resources, right? But I think our audience may also be a little bit different, so we prioritize Instagram and find hashtags work really well for us there. But we obviously use them on Twitter and also on Facebook to tie it into a bigger campaign. So
great, thank you for that. I'm going to turn to a few of the audience questions now, because there's a lot, so we'll whip through them quite quickly. The real power of a hashtag grows when as we've already discussed, you bring, you engage lots of people, you get creative, and you use the data to help you get creative. But how can you get a hashtag to boost and grow outside of social media, for example? This question comes specifically from a very small charity, so they're not always able to use the big brands or partnerships to do that. Who wants to take that one first? I'll leave that one open.
Certainly I can start with something we did for International Women's Day. We mobilised our supporters. So we asked our volunteers via email in advance, with then a reminder on International Women's Day itself, please go onto your social media and do a post about this campaign. And that was basically to get the momentum going so that we didn't get that digital tumbleweed we all fear. And that worked really well. And of course, it also had other benefits about making our volunteers feel involved, because they were playing a genuinely important role in kicking off the campaign for us. So maybe that's an option for how you could mobilise supporters, trustees, allies, funders, anybody you can think of, basically. And then you could amplify their content by putting it in a stories highlight, for example, on Instagram.
Yeah. No, great advice. Thanks, Matt. Anything to add?
Just that I agree. I think you can embed hashtags a lot more beyond social, even like physical media. I think we can underestimate the sort of enthusiasm of maybe a supporter who might just spot something, or use it in your email campaigns. We've started embedding kind of pre-written tweets into our newsletter, so that if people want to share off the back of that, and you can insert a hashtag there. It's I think thinking beyond social media is really key. And when you're working with influencers or people who are shouting on your behalf, just ensure it's inclusion.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like treating it more as a whole campaign, right? You know, it depends on what your most powerful marketing tool is. It might be email, but you can get that sort to Rachel's point. You know, get the buzz going. You know, to avoid that tumbleweed. Get people talking about it before you're talking about it. Almost. Use email. Use the right type of content. Can you create a video? Can you do a webinar or something like that? It's all about creating the movement and being creative in that process. And obviously, backing it all up with some useful data as well. There's a really good question from Diane here, which is more tailored to very, very small charities. Do you have any advice for one person working 1 day a week who's looking to get a communication plan off the ground? Any advice on where they can start?
Yes, because that's what we have at BGP. We one person 1 day a week. So the lovely Becca, who's popped up in the comments, that's about what she has, and it's what I had when I was handling the socials directly. But I would say put the emphasis on your communication plan rather than the hashtag plan, because the hashtag is just a part of your overall comms plan. So if you can get clarity on what you want to communicate to who and what you want them to do as a result, that will then help you figure out what you're posting on social media every day and which hashtags you're using. I hope that's not too simple an answer, and happy to kind of take other questions on that. But I think that clarity up front as to what you're trying to achieve is vital, and that everything else flows from that.
If Becca's hanging around in the network and bit afterwards, I'm sure you can go find her and maybe bend her ear a little bit. Yeah. Matt, anything to add to that?
I think it's about having clarity about what your objectives are. Doing your research, and hashtag is only one part of the picture. I think the space we occupy at Mermaids, we do unfortunately have to be fairly reactive, and that can really muddy the picture sometimes. We've recently undertaken a bit of consultancy with Rally, who are really sort of helping focus our digital engagement in a really clear way. So sort of taking everything we've done over the last 6 months and distilling what's working, what's not working, what are the real tangible next steps for the next 6 to 12 months. I'm not going to pretend we've done everything right all the time. I think, it's very easy for us to get distracted, but at the end of the day, we're not going to build support or groundswell of inclusion or trans rights or trans equality by only reacting to the naysayers. I think really hone in and focus what your objectives are, what you're trying to achieve. Social media is only a big part of that picture. The impact at the end of the day is what's most important.
Absolutely. And obviously, we've mentioned social media being such a big part of a hashtag campaign. There's quite a heavily voted for question here, which is, do you have any advice to give to improve any social media management for a hashtag campaign? Matt, I'll go to you first. Did you use a software tool like Hootsuite or anything like that?
Not myself, no. Again, we pretty much relied on the agencies for reporting, which is, I know, not the best answer, but there are some free tools out there that might give you a little bit of access, or just do some free trials. I think shop around, so when you do get to the stage when you can put budget into a social media platform, you'll know what's worked and what's not. And that's probably not the best answer.
There's plenty though. I mean, in terms of scheduling, and it goes back to the communication conversation. You've got tools like Hootsuite, there's Odds Buffer, Sprout, which has been mentioned today already. There's plenty of them that help me with just scheduling and will give you strong analytics as that as well. I think hashtags is a little bit different, and I've been trying to think of it for the last 30 minutes, what the hashtag trackers software platform's called, and I've totally blanked on it, but I know there is a specific tool out there that you can use to track hashtag usage and stuff like that. But yeah, there's plenty of options for you to help you better manage and improve your social media management. I don't know, Rachel, if you have anything to add to that.
Later, which has really good analytics, and it's specifically tailored to Instagram, and because that's our priority platform, we find that really useful. The metrics on each platform are also really helpful. And annoyingly, they get changed sometimes, so you can't backdate them, etc. But there is a lot of data in there that you can access, obviously, for free. But we also find that just continually testing and trying things is also just such a good way of making progress. And as long as we can see that our follower numbers are going up, but also that we're getting good engagement and good quality engagement and the conversations that we want to have according to our strategic objectives, then we're happy.
Yeah, I think that'll be a running takeaway. I think the test and iterate, test and iterate, test and iterate. I'm going to ask one final question then, and I think we can wrap things up here. In one word, what would you say is the power of a hashtag? I'll give you a moment to think.
Mobilization.
Like it.
And I'm going to go for impact.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us both today. I think this panel's really brought us full circle. I think I started off the day by kind of explaining marketing as being an art and a science, and I think nothing kind of proves that more than the hashtag, as we've discussed. Understanding user data and sentiment, and coming up with really creative ways to both mobilize people and drive impact. See what I've done there? I managed to get that both in. Lovely. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.